the barrier to entry, it looks overwhelming when you walk into this place, but there is almost something for everybody to get started at. And I think that we're doing really well is like we are thinking about how do we get people in here?
Hmm.
How do we get them that click? How do we train them on code? How do we do this and that? So that if they needed to do a quick change in their career,
Yeah.
right? You've got the Great Resignation going on. You've got DIE programs everybody's trying to be more aware of. And training, I think, is the great equilibrium to remove the glass ceiling.
Hello and welcome back to the Cybrary podcast. I'm your host, Senior Director of Content, Will Carlson. Again, reporting live, as it were, from Black Hat USA 2022. I have the distinct privilege of being joined today by Lance James. I'll let Lance give himself a little bit of an introduction, but a really close compatriot, as it were, of our very own Dave Maynor from the CTIG team, who unfortunately can't join us today. So Lance has been relegated to being stuck with me, but I'm sure we'll soldier through and have a great conversation. Lance.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what it is you do and, kind of why you're here and what you're hoping to get out of the show.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of a company called Unit 221B. It's pretty much just a conglomerate of the most amazing people I've run across in the last 25 years working with and stuff, and they all have very specialties. I mean, our lawyer wrote the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. We have like our chief research officer who solved a Twitter case. Every breach that comes around, she knows who did it within 25 seconds usually. And so she tracks and disrupts bad guys and stuff. And then we also have like an offensive engineering team, and we do also cool research, like we're working on a ransomware vaccine. And I mean, like not like a vendor, just like how do we actually solve these problems? So we try to put together like just really on-edge hackers, and then we're like 36 people now. We're organic, we're growing. And it's also a great kind of like community. We actually do something different where we actually embrace mental health and we talk about it and things like that as well, so that people don't have to feel like, if we're doing a stand-up, they're like, oh, I'm off today, blah, blah, blah. And it's part of like just, inclusive, and it's okay, So yeah, that's basically what we've been doing, and it's been pretty much just having an adventure going along the way. So
yeah, I know as we were talking here briefly, you mentioned that part of what 221B does is to kind of assess the assessor, as it were, because, everybody's always honest in marketing, right?
Yeah, so actually we are like people were how I would say it. So we had I was actually here speaking just earlier with another company, Deep Instinct, where they hired us to come in and they have a EDR-ish type endpoint application. It's Gardner's got me confused, but we're hackers. We do like you said, marketing, right? There's a buzzword. There's a cool buzzword, right? So to me, it's still antivirus, right?
Yeah.
So but like they use deep AI, like deep learning kind of stuff to do this, and we come in pretty skeptical, pretty hard on them. We're like, hey, there's no pass or fail in the sense of like we're not gonna give you can't influence our decision. We're like the UL for electricity, where you test if the plug works, right? So
I don't understand that, James. I mean, they said deep learning and AI. Is that not simply enough?
Right. So yeah, for investments, yes.
Yeah,
But for actually making sure you're secure is another thing. They surprisingly, obviously, did really great, and we actually put the transparent everything we did and how we did it on the site, and they can use it how they want, like towards their clients or on their site or whatever like this. But it allows it because I think the biggest problem right now is that a lot of security companies are making security products. But they have blind spots too because they're engineering and they've got to focus on just the myopic view of that. I mean, I could write a product right now and I'd still need someone to say, is this actually secure, right? And I think it's true because I love the saying, what's the easiest thing to do to a thief? Steal from them. What's the worst thing to do to a thief? Steal from them, right? So like in that sense, we're like kind of the security for the security products out there. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Are you finding that body of work is growing for you all, and that there's more interest in that kind of third-party validation of the validator?
Yes, actually, we got a couple other folks that are like already lined up for this. And then another one for us also is venture, portfolios. When they buy something, they need to know it's secure too. So if they're a security portfolio and then they buy another security company, introducing them into that environment, will it cause a risk to their stuff? So we are looking at like that. The integration of that new company, right? Which I think is a very clever approach from investor perspectives as well, because investors are starting to realize we can't just, it says AI, deep learning, like, that's it. No, there's it will hurt their economic standing and their investment if that doesn't occur, right? So, but yeah, we're actually doing a new assessment for another company, which will not be named at this time, but like they're seeking government, clients, and so they have a certain standard they have to meet. And so that's where we come in and give them a full transparency report, which they can include to giving like major, three-letter agencies out there. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting to hear you talk about, kind of doing that for that M&A work, mergers and acquisitions work, right? So you're an acquiring company, you get this organization. They said they were safe. They had an audit report that they were safe, and all of a sudden you roll them into the company, you connect them up with everything as you
And then
do, and then
integration's
they've got a
always-
breach in their support staff, which
Yep.
was a recent, relatively recent one.
Right.
We merged these companies, the support staff, this third-party thing that we didn't even know was loosely a vestige that was connected, and now all of a sudden it's rolled back up, and the acquiring company has to hold the bag on the breach for the bad security posture of who they just bought.
Dead on, Will. It's like it's a good market to be in, and I'm glad that they're thinking about that. I've been having some great conversations with some investor companies because I'm also, it's me personally, I'm on some boards, and things like that, just as my own personal investment of security and wanting to influence the space. But for me, I pick. Personally pick vendors wisely, but I'm glad that people are throwing the millions of dollars around. They have to start thinking about that too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that third-party risk is not going to get any less, right? And then you add supply chain attacks and some of those other things into it, and it's hard to have quality visibility these days. To be fair to cybersecurity practitioners, right? I mean, it's easy for folks like you and I, as an example, to sit and postulate on some of these things and point fingers, but it's a really hard job at the end of the day.
Well, when I write code myself, I can't trust that it's going to be secure code. We're human beings, right? And that's the big challenge, right? Is that I'm working on some cool stuff in the think tank, and because as a CEO, when I have some spare time, I'm of course being a hacker and coding stuff and playing around. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a buffer overflow, or it doesn't have some kind of problem with it or things like that I haven't, it's not that I haven't thought about it, but I'm myopic. I'm focused on building out this prototype or building out this idea. And that's where you need kind of that buffer behind you to kind of double check. I mean, everybody needs that, even if you're in security. And I think it's actually even better and smarter that people are doing that. I love that security companies are actually coming and saying, that we do with the cryptocurrency too, right? Because everybody thinks, what is that? I think it was over 100 and, I think it was I read an article and there was just on average, we see crypto wallet thefts and company breaches and that. It's 50 million here and 60 million here, and it's getting up there. It's getting up there pretty bad. And the challenge is and I kind of joke, I said, just because it says crypto on the cereal box does not make it perfect or secure, right? There people are breaking into those new things like the branches or whatever, those fork branches and stuff, and all of that stuff matters. And we had a few years ago, we had a good company that's an open source cryptocurrency company. They came and we spent a 2-year project with them because even at their design level, there's a lot of theory, but how does it actually work when it actually gets implemented a little bit, and you'd be surprised because you're and sometimes it was sad because you'd have to go back to the drawing board a bit, right? You're okay, that theoretically works, but doesn't always work in practice, so.
Yep, no, absolutely. I wonder, so being here at the conference and on the floor, and it's been really exciting to see all the traffic back here in person. We recently came back from RSA, and RSA was a good show as well, but just, Black Hat, I think, has margins more people. Maybe a little unfair for RSA because it's a lot more spread out, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think, coming to an event like this for somebody like you, there's obviously a lot of marketing motion and a lot of dollars spent on booths around. What do you think is an industry that we're doing right as it shows up here for you at Black Hat?
Okay, just because I'm pausing doesn't mean that I think a lot of people are doing it wrong. I want to be very clear. I just want to think on this question because it's a very good question. So I think that efficiency management, I think we're starting to realize that every tool that comes out, per X tool comes Y costs and human cost factors to using tools, and which we then jump into the problem of, okay, I want to hire all these security people, but then I'm adding more requirements for them to be qualified in the first place. And I think, look, I've been in this game for 25 years, and I'm telling you, I get overwhelmed with the amount of knowledge that is coming out of the bat. So I do think, but we're finding, I'm going to say it more of a broad answer to this. I don't think there's a specific area. I think that training, I've seen, okay, let's talk DIE, diversity, inclusive, and equity, and all that stuff, right? For years on end, and I'm not saying, it's again, a systemic issue. It's not saying anybody's done anything on purpose or wrong, but what I'm saying is that the training schools out there coming out, you guys too, I mean, I think are awesome. And I've noticed, now I have resources. So if I run an elementary school inside of our company, and I say yes to everybody. And I'm talking, I've had our waiter from a dinner that I met that wanted to change his career, or my Uber driver, okay? And I literally say, well, I train, but I borrow from, companies like you guys, send them there, there's documents here, and you get this. And I push the self-initiative starter.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about the industry right now is that it's not the barrier to entry, it looks overwhelming when you walk into this place, but there is almost something for everybody to get started at. And I think that we're doing really well is like we are thinking about how do we get people in here? How do we get them that click? You know, how do we train them on code? How do we do this and that? So that if they needed to do a quick change in their career, right? You got the Great Resignation going on. You've got DIE programs everybody's trying to be, more aware of. And training, I think, is the great equilibrium to remove the glass ceiling. Lots of free stuff out there, right? I think you guys have a bunch of free online stuff too. You can just I can just send people over and say, start studying this stuff, and then I'll tell you what to do next, and then I'll test you on it, right? And it scales me as a person, so there's a personal interest here. So I think training is actually, and I'm not saying it's good as you guys, but it did make me think about what I've been massively involved in. Is I've been in my free time, I try to go out of my way to really help some people that are have been kind of stuck in their careers or don't like what they're doing with their life. Try this out, and I've been using resources like you guys and many others to it, and it's working. And everybody has a click at some point, because what it used to be in the hacker community is almost this lie that we had to be brilliant, hacker edgy people and stuff. No, it's a field. It's a field. It requires focus, persistence, training, learning, creativity, all this stuff. And some fields people are just not going to like or make before, and that's fine too. But as it goes, if they're really persistent and want to make it work, they're going to make it work. And Python, languages like that, make the bar a lot lower. You don't have to worry about Malloc and C++ templates
Java.
and all the crazy stuff, right? Yeah, totally, right? So objects and all this stuff, and then the forever string classes, right? But it makes it a lot easier for people to step in. And once they get Python, they understand the concept of languages, and then they can go into other languages, Ruby or JavaScript or whatever they decide to go around to do. And then they don't get. And what I love about it is that code, from a mental perspective, it doesn't care what you look like. It doesn't it will say, did you do it wrong or right? And when you figure it out, you're the one who gets the high from that. You feel accomplished. And that gets the imposter syndrome to start decreasing. And you're like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do this. And all I do is kind of just coach and push and then give them resources. And so I think that one of the things that I think is really good is that as I see all these vendors, there's obviously very cool stuff here. Very cool stuff in so many areas, right? But the crux will be training so that people do not come in overwhelmed. You know what I mean? So I do think that's actually one of the things that is definitely happening more often and more correctly. And with the internet, you don't really have an accidental discrimination at all. You just sign up and go. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So something that we think and talk about a lot here at Cybrary right now is the capacity, capability, and confidence problems that the industry has right now. And I think part of what you were talking about casting that net wide to the Uber driver or to whoever that is that's interested, trying to find them a path. I think for a very long time we've fished from the same pond.
Yeah.
The capacity was just small.
I didn't know where to start with people back in the day. When they wanted to get it, I have to look, how did I get into this? But now there's resources, and that helps me get them helping them. Help me, help you.
And us old crusty folks too. It's like, well, how did I get in? Well, then we get really prescriptive, right?
Yeah.
Well, you need to be in an IT role for 5 years, and thou shalt do it the way that I did it, or thou shalt not do it at all.
Right.
And that's not. It is funny, not funny to me that cybersecurity as a field is a field of disciplines, right? So it's such a diverse body of work.
Yeah. When people say, I want to get into cybersecurity, which part?
Having been a mentor on our platform for a really long time, that's the perpetual first question. And then they don't. You're right. They don't even have an idea. They think cybersecurity, and they have a very narrow focus on what that could be. But for such a diverse career field, to be struggling in so many ways with attracting a diverse group of people is almost a funny problem for us to have. But I wonder if it's just definitionally that we have a definitional problem, right? So it's a perception. People think cybersecurity is that guy on the that guy with a hoodie and his gloves on, always in a dark room.
Or as Trump said, the fat guy in the basement, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
or that, right? Yeah, with the pimples, Cartman when he was playing World of Warcraft, right? Right? Mom!
No, absolutely.
Hot Pockets!
But there are. It's encouraging to me that the sheer breadth of things. Like one of the members of our CTIC team, Dave Maynard's really good friend, Ryan English, comes from a service background and is an expert in physical security and pen testing that particular space. And a lot of people wouldn't even think about that, right? Like how the physical security plays into the digital security and the cybersecurity aspects of all of this just as one, right? So then you had GRC, you had compliance, to your talk about the legal side of this. heaven knows we need more help on the legal and the policy side.
Yeah,
for
there's
us
not very
all
many
to make
cyber
sense.
lawyers, right? Like we hired the one big famous one, and he's been mainly because he's been a friend of mine for like 25 years. He's been my pocket friend, lawyer friend. You know, I'm trying to do this. What should I do? You
James
know?
gives a call and he's like,
and
James.
he's great because he's so helpful. Even if he's not charging, he's actually the one lawyer I'm like, you should charge more. You know, because he's so friendly and he's very community.
Make sure that he doesn't hear this episode. Okay?
Yeah, right, right. No, I tell him to his face, and I'm like, I don't tell anybody any of these things to their face. I wouldn't tell it. I'm like, hey, charge more.
Yeah.
So listen to this. No, but seriously, yeah, you're right. I actually got to meet some other lawyers that are like finally kind of like more dedicated and they're like a little more technical and this and that. It's funny because it actually, when we kind of rabbit hole down lawyers, I think about like patent attorneys where they all had electrical engineers or computer science degrees on their first degree and then they went to be it
Yes.
and they got it. So it's the same kind of thing. I feel like, that hopefully we'll get more of that. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's tough, but I think it's getting less. It seems daunting. But at least now there is a tunnel that will get you to a place to start, and I really like that. So
Something else you mentioned too. I was just having a conversation today with a gentleman about again pointing on that capacity issue a little bit, right? So you mentioned that it's hard for you to scale yourself beyond yourself. So having broad access to a lot of these other options to help get people into the career field is really important. And the example that he gave as we were chatting was, we were asking how he was helping to, how do you upskill your team? And he's like, well, we do it internally. And I asked him, I was like, well, how well is that scaling for you? And he kind of chuckled and laughed. And he said, well, yeah, I'm fully cognizant of the fact that I'm taking my most senior people off of the work that I need them to be doing to be helping the junior people. So now my most senior people have turned into trainers and they're not doing the work that I really critically need them to be doing. So
Yep.
I think it is a really interesting, problem in the space that I think I agree with you, improving over time. But it's tough. Like, how do you train up the people without pulling the people off the work that they need to be doing?
So we deal with that, and I want to say I'm going to pull from not a security experience, but I got a few years ago. I was working at Flashpoint, and I got pulled in to be their VP of engineering, kind of like for a year spot. Like, hey, we're going to figure some things out. They were changing and getting ready to expand and stuff, and like what they were doing. They're a great company, so this is not a diss, but they had to reset their strategy, right? And so they pulled me in to try this out. And I'm like, you guys realize you're asking a security guy to figure this out. But I read a bunch of books, mainly on organized psychology, how to scale out people and things like this. Because leadership is leadership, right? And really it starts with the people, right? And so this is not an actual comment on security, but it's not any different. It's in technology. Is that I like the Scrum, Agile and all these things. I really respect it because they looked at when you see Git and you see all Jira and you see all these different tools out there. And I think security, we have the security development lifecycle too, right? And we are seeing more frameworks and things like this. But it's not just technology, but it's more does the reward factor for the brain work, how do team building work. And so when I thought about that, how do we build a system that has its own feedback? So in the school that I run, we actually have it where that someone else advances. They start teaching them what they learned so that they also learn how to teach, so that it also shows that they processed the information. So we ended up having a pay it forward model, and they keep helping each other up. And this is within the junior world because, of course, we have videos and other things that we've recorded to, if I go, in my spare time, I'll do the video and train them on a cool thing like MITM proxy or
Mm-hmm.
how to do ARP poisoning or, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And, but Hack in the Box, Try Hack Me, also those systems, Code Wars, they all automate some of the scale. You guys do the same, right? So and so there is ways to scale it, but some of it is not tech. It's organized psychology, right? It's stepping back. Like, for instance, I have a system in place, and part of it, we also accept mental health, right? We think about that thing. We have a neuroscientist on staff that actually understand how people deal with dopamine and reward, right? And we consult with her a lot to say, well, how do I best affect this? So for instance, some of our most brightest have ADHD, which comes with the territory sometimes, right? In fact, our entire technology industry might create that in our brains sometimes, right? So we have commit to threes. You can only commit to 3 things a day and nothing more, right? And you learn how to not overwhelm yourself. So we have little, things, but I borrowed it from all agile engineering and my learning lessons of how team psychology worked. And then I'm seeing more technologies thinking about that too, because, joke from Letterkenny, but if you can be one thing, be efficient. And I think that more people are realizing that to stay in this market in security, you also have to add the UI, the user experience and the efficiency aspect. Because we all know Sims, had version 1. right? Which is eyes on glass and lots of things coming at me. And now we have prioritization and orchestration and SOAR. And like, so we're evolving, seeing these problems and going and at least putting, when we look around, we see a feedback loop that is going, okay, there's another company now that's thinking about that little problem. And there's so many problems to solve. And that's what's great about it, so.
Yeah, something great you mentioned too. I know that I've encountered this a number of times as a mentor previously on Cybrary before being here full time, but that's that how often junior people don't think they have anything to offer back.
The imposter syndrome. Yeah.
And I always encourage folks that there's always somebody that knows more than you, and there's always somebody that wants to be where you are. So you can absolutely offer that person that's not where you are a hand up, even if you're not where you think your ultimate end state destination is. So I love as you're talking about, kind of this virtuous cycle between those folks. You don't have to be a 25-year veteran. It's focused on this one particular thing to be able to help people break into this space. And I think it's funny, too, that in talking with people as a mentor, their initial question out of the gate is, well, I want to be a CISO one day, so how do I go talk to a CISO? And I think that's important, right? I mean, you need to know that that really is where you want to go. So a conversation's good to have, but it's a little funny to me too, because the CISO, just as an example, could be so far removed from your path to get there now because they've arrived.
Yeah.
So I'm a strong advocate for absolutely know where it is that you want to go, but play just above and below where you're at.
Be fluid with it too, right? Yeah. Because I did, dude, every time. So my personal system as I've gotten, lived through the security life is when people ask me, how'd you get her? I'm like, I have no idea, right? Like, I'm going to be honest. I'm like, I have no idea, right? And tomorrow I don't know what's going to happen either, but I'm along for the ride. And there's an aspect of adventuresomeness to this. And actually, and I know we're not on camera, but like on my left arm, I have in Japanese, it says beginner. And it's a reminder for me, and I also like push this concept inside of the school, and that's why I like doing like taking a beginner and having them teach, and then like doing this thing in martial arts or in like even in some practices of Buddhism and stuff in Japan. It's called Shoshin, the beginner's mind, and there was a Zen master that was brought Zen to the West, and he was saying, in the expert's mind, it's always full, in the beginner's mind, there's always something to learn. So even if you did something 1,000 times, sweeping the floor, this and that, you act like it's like you're a child and it's the first time you've done it, and you always will find some opportunities to learn something. Same with teaching. So when you do that, what we were just talking about, and you bring it back, and then for people with imposter syndrome, another thing is that's caused by comparing yourself to others. So when you put people, like what I love about engineering, when you train people in engineering and Python, and you start with them just learning like individually how to write code. Then you say, okay, we're going to get into teams, and I teach them, do not rabbit hole for more than 2 hours. Ask for help. They get out of that imposter syndrome by learning that the team actually will back you up. And that team forward thing will push you forward, because I said, you got to assume, in our training here, I'm simulating that I'm paying you guys, right? So you're costing me money if you sit there for 2 days rabbit holing it. And I said, that's how anybody else out there is going to look at it. And so I try to give them the context of where they're in. It's just not about code. It's about you have to write code for other people, like in the sense of thinking about them, and you have to be in a business environment, which is new to most of an Uber driver. So I also have to train them on communication, miscomms. You're not going to get fired for this. It's a miscomm. You just then over-communicate next time, and so there's like also what people might call soft skills. I actually think they're the bigger skills that you have to learn. Time management. How do you actually manage this? Because software engineers are told to like figure out their own schedules. That's the thing. But what it does do is once they learn that, their confidence boosts, right? They feel independent. They could, go to somewhere. They could run their own company. They could do, they have options,
Yeah, so as you're talking about Scrum, so that resonates with me. So the content development house here at Cybrary, we absolutely are a Scrum team in the way that we operate. And hearing you talk about all that makes me think about, some Scrum things. We won't delve too far down that path, but really having a team that is empowered. I think there's a lot for us all to learn from some of the lessons that the software development world has been going on.
I want to write a book on that and how we can apply it in other areas.
I think it's absolutely great. I really liked your call out about imposter syndrome and how, at the end of the day, as a security team, I strongly believe that we win or fail as a group. And it's not simply enough to go, well, they didn't do their job, so X, Y, Z happened.
Right.
And if you're leaning strong on imposter syndrome, you're likely to get stuck in that trap, right? And then we may all lose, but if we own the collective benefit of being a part of a team.
And all figuring it out. Yep.
And we stop and go, you know what? I saw this thing. I don't know what to do with it. And we can figure it out as a group.
Yep.
Then we all win together as well. So I don't. I wonder.
It's a reprogramming of the mind a little bit, but what's great about engineering and teaching code and teamwork and stuff is that it kind of, when you do it right and you have the right mentor in place or the right leader to do this, you create everybody to be leaders, which means they're not afraid to be vulnerable about asking questions. I remember back at Flashpoint, one of my guys who worked, my director of security at the time, and I was acting CISO. He's like, you know what I love about you? He goes, I get feedback from my folks. He goes, I love that you're not afraid to go, I don't know what that means, in front of an entire crowd of people. And I'm like, well, I don't, right? So like, I'm like, what is it going to help me if I try to act like, I cover that up in my ego and like, we're a team. Like, so the ego has to kind of drop a bit, and I have to be okay with, and I've actually learned as a CEO, if I'm actually okay to say that, or if I'm a VP of engineering and I'm the leader, they become okay to say that. So it sets an example that we don't have to all live that way, because if your boss is not afraid of his things he doesn't know, then that's okay, because what did Steve Jobs say years ago? We hire smart people to tell us what to do. We don't hire them to tell them what to do, right?
100%. I think it's a really interesting self-defeating cycle there, right? Like for somebody to profess to be an expert in something that they're really not, from a security perspective, we should be keenly aware of the fact that what that actually does is that increases our risk.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe in the word expert. I think it should be a word we should probably remove out of our vocabulary. The word really comes from the word experience, not that we know everything. It just means that for instance, I have been in InfoSec for 25 years, and yes, that people will probably use that term about me in some areas. But to me, I'm a beginner. I wake up a beginner. I'm going to learn something new today. That's what's great about hacking, and like what DEF CON's original days were for, and Black Hat and all that stuff, is you got in a group with your friends and people you get excited to see once a year and go, guess what I was working on? I got to share it with you. And like, it's not ego, it's like excitement. And it's the same thing. And we're all beginners. And then I was on a plane, and on the way here, and the guy's, of course, going to DEF CON, and he's like, does satellite hacking. I learned so much. Just sit and listen to him. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'm going to play around and look at this. You know what I mean? And like, there's so many diverse areas that we're in now that you can't know everything anyway.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And it's better to be like, oh my gosh, I can learn something today. And I think your self-esteem, your confidence, when you get past that imposter syndrome, like stop comparing yourself to others. Your team, there are going to be strengths and weaknesses in all of it. The idea is that you cover each other's sixes, and
absolutely,
and that's what it's all about. So.
No, that's really great. James, I really appreciate you coming on. I want to be mindful of your time. I'm sure you've got other amazing things to go off and others to talk to here at the conference today, but I appreciate you chatting with me a little bit about this and kind of organically taking this conversation where it went. It's been really useful for me, and I'm certain it will be for our listeners as well.
Well, it was awesome.
Thank you so much.
So,
Take care and have a good show.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.